Welcome back to another episode of Fertility for the podcast. I'm your host, Britt, obviously, and I am never alone, usually in this chair. So we have another amazing guest who has stepped up to share her story, her journey, and what she is doing in this space. Shatiera, welcome to Fertility Ain't Fair.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited too. You're the unicorn. Um, no, you really are. And I say that because I'm trying to get my nose up together. I'm saying that because I talk often to women on and off the podcast about how, no matter how much you love your therapist, your general therapist, right, that you have found, which is great. We always support that. It's different though when you have to explain and educate and give acronyms and abbreviations and explain procedures in this space, right? So, I have a great therapist that I love, been with her for a while now, and I love that she thanks me whenever I give her all this information about it, but we could spend the whole, 45, 50 minutes just breaking down what an IUI is. Right. So you're a unicorn because you are someone who has walked the infertility path. You have become an IVF mama. You are a therapist who specializes in this entire space. And you're a woman of color. Like you are a literal unicorn. And I'm just so glad that I found you. And when I found out that you were like in my hometown area, neck of the woods, I was like I texted my mom immediately. I was like,
Oh,
I sent her the screenshot of your image. I was like, "Wow." God sends you people randomly. Anyway, I could gush about that all day long. But I know we're here to discuss your journey and your practice and a lot of other things. So let's jump into the top of the conversation and what I ask every single guest. And I know we offline about this a bit, but the big question is, how do you define yourself? And I know it's a hard question. It's a large question. But the way we define ourselves can change over the course of lifing, right? You go through things. There are different words that you may say today than you would have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, last week, who knows? So what would you say are words or phrases to describe who you are today?
yes, that is a very hard question to answer, I think. But with some thought, I think courageous and like resilient. Um,
Yeah.
that's where I am today. I won't say I was all that space, and that I would always define myself that way. But I think right now that is the space that I'm owning, and in this part of my journey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so let's jump into that journey. So again, we mentioned that you work in the space of therapy, but you have firsthand experience on walking infertility, getting through it, getting to the other side. The place that so many of us are trying to get to is bringing home, an actual live child.
Mhm.
So let's walk that journey. So if you can give us a little bit of background on kind of what the motherhood journey, looked like for you.
Yes. Um, there's so much that goes into it, but I know I don't have all night. So I think like one of the most important parts about kind of understanding my journey is that like in the beginning I did not kind of go into this feeling like, oh, I'm gonna experience infertility and deal with this. Like no, you first comes love, then comes marriage, and then you expect the baby and the baby carriage, right? And I did all the things and I got married and I thought, okay, the baby's gonna come. And the baby didn't come as the way it says in the nursery rhyme. But when I first got married, I was actually on birth control. Right around the time of my honeymoon, I got on birth control, and uh, the goal was so that I could enjoy my honeymoon and have a little bit of control over my cycle, and for after. But I had a lot of really bad side effects and stuff, so it didn't work for me. So I was like, okay, let me get off of this birth control. So I got off of it, and then my husband and I kind of talked like, we're not trying to get pregnant right now, but, we'll just, if this is God's plan for us, then that's what it's going to be. Right. Because I was in grad school at the time. So that first year of getting married, people, constantly asking, you got married now, where the babies at? Where's the babies? And my husband is African. His family is from Ghana. And so everyone is like, where the babies at? And I could kind of wane them off a little bit by kind of just saying like, like I'm in school right now. Like, let me finish my degree. Um,
Right.
but about, after a few months, I was like, well, this is kind of strange that I'm not really getting pregnant. Um, and I mean, we weren't like tracking or anything like that. So then I was like, maybe like I didn't even wasn't even wanting to get pregnant. But then when I was like, wait, it's not happening.
But why isn't it happening?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I started tracking a little bit more. And then eventually I got to a point where it was maybe a year or so in, and then we were really like, after we started tracking and that still wasn't working, it was kind of like, okay, I started kind of doing some research on my end, my husband started doing some research on his end. um, and he then remembered that when he was a child, he he had when he was born with a medical condition, and called undescended testes, and which required a surgery when he was a toddler.
Okay.
And he totally forgot until we were on this
Ah,
journey. We were trying to
okay.
figure things out. He was doing research, and he came to me, and he's like, "Yeah, so I remember I was doing some research and I saw, this thing about undescended testes, and it reminded me that like, oh, I had this." He like completely forgot. I mean, he wasn't, he doesn't have recollection of it obviously because he was so young, but he forgot. It's never. And I was sitting here like all this time,
All this time. And
dating,
did
getting
you
married. You never.
never thought to bring up dating, conversations, kids?
Mm-mm.
But he was a toddler. So I mean, again, it's just
He
like it just
genuinely
kind
did
of
not have.
comes and goes.
God. He never thought it was
Okay.
gonna lead to
Affect
infertility. Like he
anything.
never that thought never crossed his
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was like, okay, let's go ahead and start working with the clinic. Because by this point now, I'm finished with school and I'm really kind of we're trying to like start our family.
Hmm.
And so we signed up with the clinic, um, and we went through all the things we went through. I mean, I started working with my OB first, and they really, they weren't as like proactive about
Hmm.
referring me to a clinic. So
Hmm.
I started there with them. They were kind of, not. I feel like they were not as supportive of just like, hey, like here's a specialist, with me kind of bringing ideas and suggestions to them, like, hey, can I try Clomid? I've read about this, and
Right.
they were kind of like, and so ultimately I ended up, going to the fertility clinic, and working with them. And we tried, all the things, timed intercourse. And actually, when my husband, we did all of our testing, we were originally diagnosed with unexplained infertility. So,
Let me stop there for a second.
mhm.
Because that is, I think, one of the most common like catch-alls, right? So how did it feel first to be kind of diagnosed with this, infertility tag? And then how did it feel at first to hear basically we don't know why it's that. We don't know why. Like how was that for you?
It was a lot, actually. It was kind of like you go through this process and you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to get some answers. And then the answers were like, yeah, we don't know what's going on here. And once my husband remembered this, I was like, okay, boom, that's the problem. And when we go through this testing and they're like, nope, everything, his numbers look good, everything looks good, his analysis, your numbers, everything looks good. And I'm like, it's like, so then what's the strategy? What's the game plan? Because we don't really know, but yet we've been trying for some time now, well over a year at this point,
Mhm.
and it's not happening. And so it was a lot of like roller coaster of emotions, feeling depressed, feeling like, you start to kind of internalize it's me. There's something that I
Yep.
did wrong. I'm here like, God, what did I do? Like, did I waited until I was, married to start this journey, and I got married. All these people in my family who having babies out of wedlock, no shade to them, but like, I'm
Right.
like,
No, I get it.
I
Yep.
did this the right way. And,
Yep.
why am I the one struggling?
Yeah.
Um, and so it was really, hard with like, okay, so then what do we do now? And so
Mhm.
this is why we then started at the lower, less intensive treatment option of timed intercourse. And then that didn't, work after a
Mhm.
few months of doing that. Then we moved on to, before we did that, we tried Clomid. That didn't work. Then we did timed intercourse. That didn't work. Then we started IUIs. And with the IUI, the first round, it didn't work. The second round, it didn't work. And they were like, oh, well, the semen sample that, is provided for the IUI, the sperm count is low, is
Mhm.
on the cusp
Mhm.
between like,
Mhm.
it's technically okay, but it's on the
Mhm.
cusp. And
Mhm.
so then they were talking to him about, did you, were you sick recently? What's going on? Maybe this is just like a one-time thing. And so after that, a couple of the next few rounds of IUIs, it was the same thing, except the numbers were getting lower and lower. That's when they were like, okay, we think we're dealing with some male factor infertility here.
Yeah.
So that's when my husband went to go see a urologist and talk to the doctor and all that. And then that's when they shifted gears and was like, we think the best option is IVF.
That's
It
a
was,
lot. That's a lot.
can we
How
try
many
some more
IUIs did y'all
IUIs?
do? How many?
I mean, I think we did six, but I think the last two were like because I just begged my clinic to let us do it because my
I was
insurance.
gonna say, usually stop you after, they can't stop you, but you know what I mean? They can say, hey, after 3 or so, sometimes they're like, the success rate of, past 3 or 4 is kind of, low in theory, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
That's what they told. They were just like, it's kind of like the same chance of you having sex on your own and getting pregnant. And I was like, well, my insurance is covering it for right now, so let's just do it
Let's
because
keep doing this.
my insurance did not cover IVF
Yeah.
at all. So I was like, please, let's just figure this out.
Yeah.
And of course, it didn't work. So we had to collect all the coins and the things and the change in between, the couches and stuff to pay out of pocket 100% for
Wow.
infertility. And so that journey like was a lot of, I was really depressed. I know I said that already, but like I have to repeat it because it is a very isolating journey. At the beginning of this journey, my husband, super secretive, he didn't want me to tell nobody. I have a twin brother. He's like, don't tell him. Don't tell your mama. Don't
Wow.
tell nobody. This is between us. And, I'm newly married, so I'm trying to respect my marriage and my husband and be like,
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
And so this is, after some time I did, reach out to a therapist and tried, a few different therapists and spent a lot of time trying to explain to them, what the 2 week wait was and all these things.
Yeah.
And finally, my husband, I just had a conversation with him like, this doesn't work for me. Like, I cannot cope like this. I'm depressed. I'm not doing well. I'm starting to isolate, and this isn't me. I feel weird being around my friends, knowing that they don't know my journey. They make
Yeah.
comments, they ask innocently, and
Yeah.
they don't know my family. I'm talking to my grandma, and she's like, when you bringing me them babies? I ain't got much longer.
Oh,
You're like, I can relate.
yeah.
So so ultimately, we did go through with IVF, and we have two IVF babies. My
Yay.
son is 5.5, and my daughter is 8. And so we ultimately moved forward with IVF. I still didn't respond as the way that they thought I was going to respond. So um, but I got enough. And I just say God worked it out because literally we had enough embryos that we went in for my daughter. The first round of IVF was not a success. Our
Okay.
second transfer, no, it was our third transfer. The first cycle didn't work. The first frozen embryo transfer didn't work. The third transfer worked, and that was my daughter. And then I had one embryo remaining.
Okay.
And I was like, after, they're like, oh, once you have a baby, you're just super fertile. So like, you're just going to get pregnant on your own. And so I was like, okay, come on with it
Okay.
now. Save me some money. And that didn't happen. So after the first year of, not conceiving after we had my daughter, we're like, all right, let's start this process. And we started kind of decide like, do we want to do um, this whole process again? Because this was $30,000. And so we're
Right.
like, it didn't work the first time. So if we spend, we thought at the time $10,000 for this transfer and it doesn't work, now we back at 30,000, or do we just start back over at 30? So excuse me. So I went into my clinic and I was talking to them about it. My doctor was like, "Why don't you just do a transfer? You have the embryo." And I was like, "Yeah, but like I don't know about the $10,000. That feels too risky." And she was like, "Oh, it's only $5,000." And I was like, "For the transfer?" She was like, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, well, we could do that tomorrow then." I'm like, I'm willing to risk it for that.
Right.
So we did, and we got pregnant with my son, and I got my girl, and I got my boy, and
And you're
after that,
happy and
done.
good.
We was
Right.
done. I
Yeah.
said if it was a girl, if it was a boy, no, I said if it was a girl, I would be done because no, I would want to keep trying because I felt like I want to give my husband a boy. But my husband was like, if it's a girl, I'm done because I don't want to have three girls. I don't want to run that risk. So I was
That's
like,
true.
oh, okay. So we decided clearly we done after this, regardless, no matter which way it is. Because I said if it's a boy, I'm done because I got my girl with my boy,
Yeah.
and I'm not paying all this money and doing all this again.
Right.
So we have no embryos remaining, and like we completed our family. We feel happy and confident about that, and we had to take out a loan and stuff to pay for it, but we had paid the loan off like within the first year. I think we got like an
Good.
interest-free loan or something. And we
Yeah.
did pay like a lot out of pocket too. We emptied
Yeah.
out our savings account
Yeah.
and went through a lot. So yeah, so that is, you know, the roller coaster that was, a totally unexpected, never imagined that we would be. I
Right.
didn't even really understand infertility, know what it was.
Yeah.
I hadn't known anybody with infertility until I, like, just before I started dealing with my own infertility, I had a coworker who, so when my husband was like, "Don't talk to nobody, don't tell nobody," I had a coworker who I shared an office with, and she
Oh
was
wow.
going through it, and we would talk. So she was kind of like a good source of support, and he didn't even know in the beginning I was talking to her
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's my colleague. She ain't gonna ever see you outside of
Right.
work.
Right.
so
Yeah.
so yeah, but before that, I didn't even know anybody who experienced infertility, nothing. So
Yeah. So how many years, I guess, in total were you all in this journey?
so we got married in 2012, 13, 14, 15. So about 3.5. Because my daughter
Okay.
was born in 2016.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so about 3.5, but the last half was like pregnancy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So about 3 years of like trying different, things, and the journey of infertility to conception. And then
Yeah.
if you're thinking about like till birth, then that's
Mhm.
what's 3.5.
So obviously with you being in the, therapist space, mental health space, you know how important that is. And going through this, you know that that's probably the biggest hurdle. I mean, I would say, I think, we can all, talk about the physical, challenges with this, and those are many, but I think for the majority of us that I've spoken to, again, on and off the podcast, the emotional toll, the mental toll is where this can go off the rails.
Absolutely.
Um, and you mentioned depression. And you mentioned, looking for support, or having at least someone to talk to about it. So how did you manage your mental health while you were going through this?
That's a really good question. And I dealt with a lot of anxiety too. Just a lot of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And loss and grief. And, you know, once I talked to my husband, he was like, "Yeah, I'm not really, fond of you talking to people, but I understand that you need that for you. That's how you kind of cope." So, he was like, I'm okay with it. So I started reaching out to, I didn't start telling, announcing it on Facebook or anything, but I started reaching out and building that support network. So I started talking to my immediate family, my brother, my parents. I talked to my sister-in-law. I had a couple of close friends that I was finally felt comfortable. Most of my friends did not even know anything about this journey until I was long on the other side.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so yeah,
Okay.
like in recent years, years when I started doing more advocacy and speaking, you know, on a public platform. But my kids were like toddlers by the time I really started like sharing publicly, because I still felt so much shame and guilt. Um, and you know, did I, you know, just so many things that I was really, you know, I was really still trying to heal from myself. Um, so building that social support network with some close friends, and you know, had a really good friend of mine who was, you know, a prayer partner with me, and she would pray for me, pray with me. She was amazing. I love her. um, and I had I was not, I wanted to do support groups, but there were none close by me. And this is long before COVID. So their virtual groups wasn't a thing. So you had to
Right.
drive all the way from Virginia, where I'm at, to Maryland. And I was like, I can't do that. And then all of the therapists were, you know, white. There was nobody, literally nobody on their whole list that was Black. And this is like the clinic's therapist, folks who have that experience. And then they were $1 million. They were too expensive.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so, so I connected with an online with Resolve. Resolve has like some online option where you can kind of join, and I created like a secret code name.
Yeah.
I can just truly be so open and vulnerable about exactly what I was dealing with. And like they would have, you know, threads in that platform for like people who are doing a transfer in January. And so we're all kind of getting our protocols and going through the same kind of process. So that was extremely helpful for me. And to be able to kind of be in a space with other people who knew the language, who knew what I was talking about, understood the journey that I'm on. And so between that and then like building up my social supports and being able to kind of talk about it and lean into my friends, you know, those are the things that really helped me get through it. I did have to fire a couple of therapists because I just, not that they weren't great therapists, but it's just like I was just tired of explaining, and like it just was draining. And like you said, I'm spending the whole session. I can't even talk about how I'm feeling because I gotta make sure you understand the words I'm using. And so that just felt like counterproductive, and it left me feeling frustrated. And so
Yes.
I just, you know, I was like, I'm gonna, you know, look for other resources.
Yeah. 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 No, a lot of that resonates. A lot of that resonates. Um, Shout out to Resolve real quick because I was at a meeting last night in Richmond, and so shout out to Resolve South. But yeah, I you know, I had saw Resolve the last several years on social media, you know, went to their page and found they did have, you know, local support groups. And yeah, I think pre or during COVID, obviously it was all virtual. And I was on their mailing list for months. And I was getting the we're having a virtual meeting RSVP. And I was like, nope, 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 nope. And I skipped. And then finally, I, I don't know what the trigger was for me, but there was a meeting that finally came up, and it was like, hey, we're having our first in-person meeting. That's what it was. Our first in-person meeting post-COVID, come out. So this has probably been at least 6 months now. More than that, I think, at this point. I've been going for a little bit. So I started last year going to the in-person meetings, and it has literally been life-changing. Like, and I mean, we were all first time in-person people when we first came to that meeting. We were all like tiptoeing into the library, like, you hear my results? Okay. It was like AA, but fertility AA. And and it was so it would be as to close the door, as soon as we closed the door, and we were like, let's just kind of icebreaker. I think we were crying in 2 minutes. But it was good. And every meeting that I've been to has been, you know, new people, you know, all different stages, all of those things. And it has really been a blessing, and like free therapy. And regardless if I speak or not, it doesn't matter. And to be able to also kind of like, you know, coach others who are new to the space. Or, you know, last night, 2 women were, you know, about to start their first IVF cycle, and they're terrified. They just got their meds, and, you know, I was like, oh, PTSD. But I can help. I can help. You know, but I just wanted to give that shout. So if anyone's listening or watching who has not checked out Resolve, which is the National Infertility Organization, and see if they have a group or a Facebook group or whatever, however you want to interact with them. But they might have someone locally who is doing these things virtually or in person, and it might be helpful. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront. I want to get into the space of, you crossing over, right? Like you've been blessed to cross over into mom land with living children. And what I have heard commonly from other women who have got to that space is that, it doesn't erase
No.
what happened, right? Like, of course, I'm sure on some level, obviously you're grateful and you feel very blessed. And it's like, I know that, other people don't get this. And so, all those things, but there's still, I'm sure on some level, it's a scar. It's trauma. It's a scar. It's something that changed your whole life. And while you have these beautiful children to look at, it's like, it's still like, I don't call it a badge of honor, but there's still something there. So do you resonate with that at all? And then, does any part of that past journey still show up in your life? And if so, how?
Yeah, so it definitely shows up all day, every day because of the work that I do. But also like I have, since I made public my story, and that was a few years ago that I shared during one of Resolve's infertility awareness weeks, where I finally kind of felt courageous enough to share my story publicly, and it was still only on my little public private social media
That's
account.
huge.
But it was very huge, and I got so many people who were so supportive and like just everything. And then I also had so many people who reached out to me that were just like, man, I'm going through this.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. And so that's really been helpful. But to your point about being on the other side, I frequently still deal with a lot of like grief, because grief is a lifelong journey.
Absolutely.
And I feel like everybody thinks like, and I thought this at one point too, like, I can't wait. As soon as I get this positive pregnancy test, like life is just going to be amazing. And then, just dealing with pregnancy and being sick and, having your face in the toilet, and you're like, did I just pay $30,000 to have my face in the toilet? Like, why did I want this so bad?
Why?
You start feeling guilty and like regret. Should I have done this to myself?
Yeah.
All the way through postpartum of like, like colicky baby who cried and wouldn't go to nobody. My first child, I love her to death, but she was a tough first baby. And I mean, I was like, I'm not doing it again. This is it. We only have a what? But just like, thinking that like the goalposts definitely felt like it kept moving because
Yes.
I got this baby and I'm supposed to be happy, right? I'm supposed to be enjoying this. And I was really still struggling with a lot of anxiety. And so, I worked through that ultimately, but definitely a lot of feelings that came up. And then, things like sharing my pregnancy announcement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I cried and yearned for the days to be able to share my pregnancy announcement, to do my maternity photos and do all of these amazing things that, pregnant people do. And I desperately wanted. And when those times came up, I felt a huge sense of guilt, right? That like, now I'm going to be the person who's potentially triggering someone else in my timeline, the way that I experienced some of those triggers when I was scrolling through Facebook and see, oh, another pregnancy announcement. Yay for you. Yeah. Right. Right. So I just, like, I mean, I did what I tried to balance my thoughts with is just like, this is my moment and I can experience both of these emotions and grief and sadness for the people who are still on this journey, and excitement and all of that for the journey that I'm now on. But it does also leave you feeling like I'm not a part of the infertility club anymore. Like the people who are dealing with infertility, like it's like, oh, do I talk to you still? Because I don't want to be a trigger for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so so it definitely, like, Mother's Day is another tough one where, many a years just, everybody posting Happy Mother's Day and their pictures and their kids and, oh, my whole world, and you made me a mom, and I couldn't wait to, at the time I'm like, I'm tired of seeing these posts.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I can't wait to, be this corny, cheesy mom who's, taking matching photos and posting. And when I get to this space every single year to this day around Mother's Day, I still have these feelings and memories that come up of the years that I was, crying desperately, wanting to be a mother and to be celebrated in that way. And, one of the things that my church does is, like, they celebrate all of the women in the church, like not just mothers, but everyone. And I just felt so guilty. I mean, there's one year I didn't even go to church because I'm like, they're not about to give me something to for being a mother, and I'm not a mother, and I don't want to be called a mother because I'm not. I was just in my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, it just, like, it's just so much grief and triggers that come up still to this day. When I, any holiday, when I'm posting my family, anytime I'm sharing photos on social media of my family, there's still always a moment of pause, because it's like this picture perfect world that, well, first of all, it's not really perfect behind the picture, right? We all know that. But, like, when you're on this journey desperately wanting that, it's like that's this picture perfect world. And really just kind of always feeling like I want to still also honor that part of my journey, and also people who may be in this space with me that are currently in that journey. And it feels kind of like, just like, how could you be sitting here posting this when you hated when people did that before, when you struggled, and now you're doing it to someone else?
Yeah.
So I definitely still deal with, a lot of that kind of, like, guilt
Yeah.
around being a mom.
No, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's something that probably isn't discussed enough. Like that limbo space. Like you said, I feel like I'm still a part of this community. I've been there. I understand you. I empathize. I get it. But I also want to have my moment. And I often think about that in the prayers that I do get to that, hope to get to that space one day. And I'm like, I feel that that's a very real thing. And you're kind of in both spaces. And I see a lot of women who will say, like, hey guys, I am, we had our baby or we're almost to that point. So I am going to dip out of this space out of respect for, the community. And I've seen other women say, you know what, here's the announcement, do with it what you will, unfollow me, mute me, whatever. But I'm going to stay here for you guys because I want to help somebody else out. So I think, there's no right or wrong answer, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, it is still a part of your life, a part of your journey. You see your children every single day. Obviously, you're like, I know how I got there. And
A lot of money.
look, so do your kids understand how they got here? Do they understand? I know they're still, youngish, but do they understand what IVF is? Do they understand that mommy tried really, really hard and we did a lot of things to get you here? So act right every single day. But
Yeah, you owe
do
me a
they,
lot of
do
money,
they
little girl.
understand? Hey, like,
Uh,
you owe me 30 grand in 30 years. But do you talk about it with your children? I think it's important to ask that question. Like, do you put it in
yeah.
a way that makes sense for them?
Yes. So my son is clueless. He's 5. He knows nothing. He doesn't ask anything. He has no
Okay.
interest. My daughter is very inquisitive. She asks a lot of questions. I try to answer them all. And so just last year, ironically enough that you're asking this, last year I bought an IVF book, also because I was also thinking about considering and still plan to write, like, a book for, brown girls and brown
Yes.
families that, kind of can explain and talk about IVF for a child,
Yes.
on a child's level. So I bought a few books to kind of just see what these books are talking about. And I had them on the stairs one day because I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna bring it upstairs. And here goes my little girl who knows how to read now. She picked it up and started reading it. And
Wow.
it's never been a secret. It's never been
Mhm.
something that like I keep from them. It's just more my plan has always been as it comes up naturally, I will engage and answer. And that's kind of how things have been. And I heard her reading and I was like, Maya, what are you reading? And she's like, oh, this book. I was like, no, I told you to read my book. But then we started kind of talking a little bit about it. I don't think she really fully understands, of course, just yet. But definitely she has read the little book, and so she knows. And I showed her. In fact, I had this for something else, but I was showing her her little embryo that I
Her
still
embryo
have from the
picture.
clinic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I love
so
it.
yeah, so I talked to her a little bit about it because she's older and can kind of
Mhm.
ask questions and be inquisitive. But yeah, I think it's very important to minimize and reduce any stigma, any shame
Yep.
attached to it,
Yep.
and not keep anything a secret. And as well as that is also what propelled me to share things publicly because I don't want my children to ever feel a type of way about the way they were conceived. So yeah, so I talk to and my son as he gets older and asks questions or things come up and he probably hear me talking to his sister about it.
Yeah.
They will be well aware. And
I
and I'm gonna get them some little shirts. I saw the shirts that I made this myself by the way, but
I love it.
thank you. I'm gonna make them some shirts that says, I saw the cute saying, my first babysitter was an embryologist.
I see
Uh,
that.
yeah,
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I'll have
Yes.
a whole photo
Yes.
shoot or something.
I absolutely love it. I love that for y'all. I love that there's open dialogue about it. I think it's also really important. I love that. And I love so my husband and I also have started writing children's books. So we haven't gotten to this space in the children's book world, but I have a book drafted about the many ways to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I, all the different ways and including, of course, medical assistance. But I love you have to. I
Mhm.
mean, when you get a moment, but you have to write like the whole IVF for brown families children's book. That's it. That's it. So as we try to wrap up, we have to talk about Seeds of Hope and what I say it probably every other recording with guests. I say, I love that in this community I have found so many women who have taken their journey, their pain, and turn it into something beautiful and needed in our space to help sister out or help a girl out. So, or a family out. So tell us about Seeds of Hope and also tell us where you can be found if someone wants to reach out to you and connect for personal or professional.
Yes. So Seeds of Hope is my other baby. It is my new business, my private practice, where I am a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed therapist in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, soon to be Georgia as well. Um, but so I opened up my business to provide support in a way that I couldn't find when I was looking, and to help other folks on their emotional journey. Because one thing I forgot to say at the top of this whole call is that when you were mentioning even about like how the mental health and that you see this as you're talking to guests as like a reoccurring thing, it is actually some research that has been done has said that like it is actually the number one top reason why people discontinue treatment even when their prognosis is relatively good. It is when they take out and they have factored out insurance. So the research had only they had only researched folks, included folks who had insurance coverage. So money wasn't the primary, reason, but emotional toll. And secondary was like emotional toll on the relationship. And so I think it's really important to talk about that as well. So I've found those things out through my my education and training. So I have lived experience, and I thought I just knew it all because I done been through it all, but I have learned so much more in the academic space. I have taken trainings and done all of these things, and just learned so much more. But it is really common And it is really impactful, and it really can be a deterrent and a reason why people need treatment. I do think with every fertility clinic referral, mental health referral needs to be made. If it was up to me, that's what it would be.
Absolutely.
And so that is why when I did get licensed, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. And in fact, when I got licensed, I was kind of figuring out what I'm going to do. And I saw a job posting for a perinatal therapist. And I was like, what is this? I didn't even know perinatal therapist was a thing.
Right.
Then I was reading the posting, and it was like, you must have a perinatal mental health certification within 1 year. And I was like, there's a certification for this? I had no idea. So I, started that job, and then I was like, this is where I need to be. This is the space that I need to be in. And so I've been doing that. But then when I decided to open my own business, I always knew and had planned that this was going to be my priority. This was going to be my space, because my own journey, and wanted to give back specifically to folks on the journey of infertility. And of course, with that comes pregnancy and postpartum and stuff as well. But like, my priority is folks on this journey. So I do offer individual therapy. I will be offering workshops for folks who are planning and preparing for reproductive treatments, like IVF, IUI. And so I'll be doing workshops to kind of talk and work with couples and partners to learn coping skills and just kind of prepare for this emotional journey, and as a partnership. So I'll be offering some workshops on that. And I also do third-party reproduction. So if you're going through surrogacy, or using a sperm or egg donor, I do screenings and consultations for those. I'm a member of ASRM, which is what a lot of most clinics require for those screenings and stuff. And yeah, so that's and I also provide training for other perinatal therapists, because a lot of folks who are trained for perinatal, they don't do training in infertility, because they're looking at the pregnant in the postpartum period. But the goal is pregnancy, and we're not immune from PMADs, which is perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and it does show up sometimes and look differently in folks who have a history of infertility, right? You think about going to the fertility clinic and going through IVF, and you're in that clinic every day getting, blood draws and all kinds of stuff, seeing them every single day, all day, talking to them constantly. And you graduate from that clinic and you go to your OB, and they're like, okay, we'll see you in a month. What now? A month? What?
I need weekly appointments. What are we doing? What's happening?
So it can be a lot of anxiety, and still worry, and we can still experience, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and folks don't have that training. They don't know to ask those questions and to look for those things. So I also offer training. So if there's any therapists who are listening in and want more training on infertility and how to support patients who are navigating pregnancy and postpartum after an infertility journey, then I do trainings for that. I do speaking engagements, and so so I try to I do a little bit of it all.
You're doing the Lord's work, clearly. Literally taking all of your personal knowledge, matching out with educational knowledge, continuing to not only practice and do the things, but also train others to do the things that need to be done. And I'm just thankful and grateful that you were able to connect back to me and get on our show and just talk about all this. This is so important. So thank you for what you're doing. So if anyone wants to find you on social media or websites, where should they find you?
Yeah, so my website, business name, Seeds of Hope, but my website is Seeds of Hope CC, like counseling and consulting.com. My social media, I'm on Instagram with Seeds of Hope CC and TikTok. I'm an elder millennial, so I still don't have the best TikTok, but I got one.
We're doing our best, okay? We are doing our best.
Yeah, so please follow me there too. Yes, I have Instagram and TikTok. I have a Facebook, but I'm not as active on Facebook as well. So see www.seedsofhopecc.com.
I love it. I appreciate you. I thanked you earlier, but I thank you again for being here. Thank you again for telling your story and for speaking up in this space, and for being an advocate for all of us, before, during, and after the journey. So, Shatira, thank you so much for joining Tailgate Fair.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating this space for folks like me to share my journey and my story. And storytelling is really helpful as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you.